we'll start with your favorite, which is not ironic in that statement. It is actually your favorite, which is exercise. And so I think what would be helpful is, you've talked about this before, but this kind of framework of the Centenarion Decathalon, do you want to just quickly state what that is? Because I think it kind of gives some grounding and foundation to how you think about exercise compared to how others may talk about it.
Yeah, so there's so much I could say about this. I really thought you were going to throw me the usual ball and start with nutrition, which of course is not my favorite, but we will talk about it. But you're right, exercise is my favorite, and it is my favorite because I think the data are very clear that exercise, if leveraged to its capacity, has a greater impact on your lifespan. Remember, that's the how long you live piece, and your health span, that's the how well you live piece, than any of the others, with the only exception potentially being emotional health, right? So there's clearly going to be the case of the individual whose emotional health is in such ruins that until that is addressed, no amount of physical health matters. And in fact, anything else is just prolongation of agony. But if you exclude that case, which is, I don't want to minimize that case because I think there are many people who have been in that situation, exercise really is the king of interventions. So you alluded to something that is one of my favorite topics, which is called the Centenarion Decathalon. So, and again, I realize that some people have read the book and they understand what this means, or they've heard me talk about it. But again, the purpose of this podcast, I think, is to make sure that someone who's new maybe gets up to speed on this, or it's a refresher for someone. So the Centenarion Decathalon is an idea that came to me in the summer of 2018. And it's an idea that occurred in an instant, but it was really the result of many years, probably 4 years of suffering, so to speak. So the suffering started at the end of 2014 when I decided to stop competitively cycling. And not only did I stop cycling, but I was not going to go back to any other sport. So I was not going to be competing anymore in masters swimming, cycling. Obviously, I had no desire to go back and compete in boxing or martial arts or anything like that. Basically, I was done competing, and all I wanted to do was exercise for the sake of exercise. And this, for me at least, was a bizarre foreign idea, because from the age of 13 until that point in time, which was 41 or 42, I had never trained without a specific purpose. Every single rep, every single lap, every single pedal stroke, everything I ever did was always geared towards a purpose. And now for the first time ever, I was kind of like, what should I do today? I guess I should go for a run. Okay, I guess I'll lift weights tomorrow. I'm in the gym lifting. What am I lifting for? Well, I used to do this. I guess I should still do this. But it was like this totally rudderless existence that I had. And it stayed that way until the summer of 2018, when I was at the funeral of the parent of one of my best friends. And again, I apologies for repeating this because I do write about this in the book, but basically at that funeral, I realized that while my friend's mom had died at a relatively old age, I think about 89, her physical life had basically demised so significantly in the past decade that her actual death was almost just a matter of formality. But she had lost the ability to do the things that mattered to her most a decade earlier. So she couldn't play golf anymore because of her shoulder. She couldn't garden because of her knees and hips and back. I mean, she couldn't even play with her grandkids. And so she spent most of the last decade of her life largely uninvolved in anything. And, did come down with dementia in the final year of her life, and that's what ultimately took her life. But, I was just totally blown away by this person that I once remembered as being completely vibrant, losing everything and spending this last year in this state. And I realized in that moment, as I literally sat in a church pew, first of all, this is really common. And secondly, this is what I want to train for. Like for the first time in 4 years, realized, the thing I want to train for is to avoid this. I want to come up with an athletic event that will be done at the end of my life, and everything between now and then will be training for it. And so I just came up with this idea called the Centenarion Decathalon, not because it implies that one has to live to 100 to compete, or not even to imply that it has to have 10 events, but simply as a mental model to say, what are the most important activities, both activities of daily living and activities of performance that I want to be able to do at the end of my life? And how well can I define them? How well can I understand the physical traits that will be necessary to execute them? And then how much can I reverse from there or backcast from there what I need to be doing today to increase the probability of doing those things tomorrow to the highest level? And that has become obviously a huge obsession of mine. As you know, I, along with a couple of other folks, have started a company around this called 10 Squared, which is just geared towards training people to do this. And I think that it is, at least until someone shows me a better idea, the best model for how to train if your goal is not something very specific. So again, if you came to me and said, I know how much you love jiu-jitsu. If you're like, look, there's this tournament coming up in 6 months and I really want to compete for it, that's not the Centenarion Decathalon. That's a very specific type of training you need to be doing in jiu-jitsu to go and compete there. If, my wife is running the Boston Marathon next year and she wants to, run a certain time, she will have nothing to do with training her Centenarion Decathalon. She is going to be doing very, very specific running workouts to make sure she hits her goals. So there are lots of other ways to train, but my point is that most people aren't training to be the best at their local jiu-jitsu tournament or to run their PR at the Boston Marathon. And even if they do those things, they're usually fleeting. And ultimately, what people really want to be training for is to be the most kick-ass versions of themselves in the last decade of their life. And, again, if that means you're 80 to 90 years are functioning like you're a really good 70-year-old, that's a totally different experience from what most people go through.